You've selected topic 2, specifications of the course Building Industry Contracts. An amazing photo in that first introductory slide there of the Fuji television building, designed by Japanese architect Kenzo Tanji. I guarantee excellent specification writing would have been called for on this particular building. Quickly to summarise the course requirements, make sure you're familiar with the Moodle front page, assessment requirements, submission dates, and also keep regularly informed for regular postings. When writing the specification, it's very clear that there's three main criteria. That the specification should not be ambiguous, shouldn't be confusing in any way. It should coordinate and communicate very well between both the drawings and the contract, and it should also be realistic in the standard of design and the performance criteria that's being asked for by the client. So it's important that the specification clearly communicates the construction element and the method of installation, and so that it can be constructed correctly. Without a specification being a clear form of communication, the quality of the finish, the method of construction, and the description of each building element would need to be noted on the project drawings, which is almost impossible. The picture shown here in the slide is a sketch design of a building called Falling Water, which is an American architect design building by Frank Lloyd Wright. And it's very clear, even at this sketch design phase, that there's a lot of information that what are the materials, how are they sitting, how are they going to be put together, what's the quality, where's the windows, how will that all be? So the specification already, even if it's in a preliminary form, it needs to communicate more than what we're looking at with the drawing here and the sketch design. There are two simple but essential requirements when writing a specification, and they are: number one is to really understand and know what's required by the client, and number two is to be able to communicate and be able to put that down on paper very clearly. Once it's put down on paper very clearly, that common piece of information will be read by subcontractors, suppliers, other designers, consultants, the builder, and also the client himself. Problems with specification writing or lack of clear communication in specification writing often results in disputes and costs for one of the parties. And a lot of this comes back to then to a couple of areas. It's lack of information and subject knowledge in specification, and that I classify that into two areas. It's lack of thought when writing the specification, or also it's lack of knowledge in the construction materials and how that particular element, that component or that part of the building is actually going to be constructed. So as a design document, the specification really is a written account of the building client's requirements. But together with the drawings and the conditions of contract, the design team leader and specification writer are able to confirm then with the building owner that his or her requirements and intentions can be clearly understood and then documented further for construction. So it's quite a difficult situation to be a specification writer, because on one hand, that information has to be clearly understood in industry speak to the builder, all the designers and the subcontractors and suppliers. But on the other side, the building owner who is unfamiliar with the industry, he's the one that's actually paying for the specification and the documentation. So he or she definitely needs to clearly understand also, when reading the specification in conjunction with the drawings, what he's actually getting, or what he or she is actually going to have built and designed for them. The costing function of the specification is really important, and having used good specification and poor specification over the years, it's really important that the specification portrays the minimum of errors, that it creates it's very concise, it's economical to produce, and it's very easy to use and refer back to. At the present times, there's very few measurement techniques that can be used to define quality, and so the specification is really important to relate in what is actually being communicated, and then how to price it. Someone else looking at those words and then sort of putting it together and saying this is exactly what is required. There's the contract function of the specification as well, and it's acknowledged that the courts generally have held that in the event of conflict between the drawings and the specification as a written document will actually govern. So again, it comes back to the importance of having clear communicated requirements and of the client in the specification, and making sure that that's can't be confusing for whoever else might be reading that. The general conditions, regardless of which form is being used, are usually bound with the specification. So by reference is made a part of the specification. The on-site function of the specification. So during out the progress of the building works, the specification not only acts as a contract document, but it also serves as the purpose of being the working document for many of the site personnel, subcontractors and suppliers associated with the project. These people refer to the specification regularly, in fact almost daily, with guidance with workmanship, materials and construction methods. And regularly it's used to confirm even with delivery or with ordering of materials and those type of products for the construction project. So for the on-site construction personnel, the specification is a working document or a manual that communicates the architect's design and the client's requirements as a reality. Other functions will include reference for insurance considerations, tendering requirements, and alternative options. So you've identified what the client wants for a particular type of a tile or material or finish, but it can also be used then as the benchmark to consider alternatives. The people that rely on the specification, so as I said throughout the presentation, the client, the contractor, any client's representative, if he can't or she can't be at the project, the design team, so everybody associated with designing the building, and engineers and other staff, local authorities, which I haven't got on this list here, so local councils, state local authorities and other similar sort of groups, subcontractors and nominated subcontractors, and 4 types of specification that will really influence the way in which you'll communicate or write a specification. And those types of specifications are the performance specification, which will include often a measure, so it'll provide it'll be for a 24 volt AC control wiring. It'll be for a certain it's got to operate between certain pressures, 140 to 175 kPa. So it's got a performance outcome. The next one is a descriptive specification. Now, a descriptive specification describes in a lot more details the materials to be used and the type of workmanship, how it's to be manufactured, erected and installed. So it's very clear, a lot more detail in a descriptive specification. A reference specification, having said that, will quite often give reference to a recognised industry code or standard. So we might say that formwork has to be stripped, designed and constructed with a particular Australian standard. So it might be an Australian standard to AS 3600 or AS 3610. As for a direct specification, the direct specification method usually gives the make, model, catalogue number and very similar product or installation instruction requirements of the manufacturers. The direct specification is great in one way because there's no confusion over what is required. But having said that, it usually leaves no option for an alternative, or if there's not a lot of investigatory work done while writing the specification, it may be found that the product or material is not in production anymore, There's not an approved applier or finisher of that type of product or material, and so sometimes the direct specification is not a suitable method and form of specifying. Take with you a summary to keep specification simple. I'd say it's these 4 points on this slide here, and that's to keep it simple and clear. Don't be too verbose. Don't use difficult wording. Don't use words that are really difficult to understand, or someone will have to keep looking to referencing to read the specification. It's going to make it too difficult. Avoid using long clauses. Keep it really concise, and be specific in the detail. Don't wander around with trying to have a conversational style of writing. Keep it specific and put it in some logical order. You know, what I'm saying there is that if you're putting up a fence or if you're putting up a building, try and keep the components and how you're going to start that process. Putting in a kitchen, putting on a roof. Keep the specification in an order that makes sense, from the preliminaries, from the groundworks, from the superstructure, from the roof, and then from the fit out. Those type of logical order and sequence of writing the specification makes it simpler for everybody then to refer. We've come now to the end of the this topic, and it's a good opportunity to now read through the study guide in a bit more detail, refer to some of those resource materials and links that are in the study guide, and also work through the workbook activities. It is a good idea to maintain the workbook activities as you do the topics through the course of the semester. If you've got any questions, as I said earlier, post them to the group. Or email me or post them to the question and answer forum.